Okay, so now we're going to add the like button and the retweet. And I basically am going to provide you guys with these images. You can get them from, maybe just do a Google image search too. But basically we're going to have 4 sets of images. There are these red hearts for like, and then there's the gray version when they're, kind of not set yet. And the same thing goes with the green retweet when they're set, and when the gray ones when they're not reset. And what we're going to do is, if you go to the main storyboard, so we do have this table view cell that basically has the author, and then right now that Twitter content, so we set it, let me just make it bigger so you can see it. The constraints for it are, it has a little leading and a trailing margin. The bottom is all the way to the bottom of the cell. The top is to this author and also to the time label. And so that's all good, but we want to actually, instead of the bottom of this going to the bottom of the cell, we're going to put those buttons. So we're going to change that a little bit. So let's go and first kind of give ourselves a little bit more space. So right now we had like 150. And let's say that we add another 40, so we make it 190. So let's see. And so give it a little more space. And then what we want to do is we want to take, with this tweet text label, we're going to remove the bottom space constraint. So right now it just basically has this leading, trailing, top space, okay? And then we're going to add these buttons. So let's go and do that. So we're going to have one UI button. I'm going to drag it actually sometimes what I do is I drag it here and then see where it shows up and then start spacing it out. So this is going to be my like button. And so let's go for the how to set it. So this is going to be a custom button because we're going to have an image. There's not going to be a text associated with it. It's just going to be empty. But we're going to have an image, and that image was the favorite icon. Okay, so you see it show up there. And the other thing we want to do is we're going to kind of place it now. So we got the favorite icon, the disabled version, and we can basically, and I usually like to label it. So I kind of click on this and say fav button, so that when I look at it, I know what it is. Okay, so now that I have it selected, I'm going to come here. And first I'm going to just give it a constraint of the trailing. And let's say it's 10 pixels from the edge, so 10 points. So I'm going to do that. And then from the bottom, I want it to be about 10 too. And you can, it kind of varies with what the design is. And I know what the width and height of it is because those images are 30 by 30, so I can specify that. Let's see what happens when it goes here. Great. And then we have this. Now, the other thing we have to do, and maybe I was a little, because we're going to make this cell be kind of dynamic height. Sorry, I was getting notifications. So let's just actually make this a little smaller. So let's go to the tweet cell. And I know I set it to 190, but let's go back to the 150 that we had. It's fine. Okay, so here I have the fav button, and I'm going to give it a top space, like what's the spacing between the button and the bottom of the tweet text label. So I can actually kind of control drag from the fav button to the tweet text label. I can do that and then pick vertical spacing because that's what I'm kind of setting. And then if you look at, where the ruler is, that now if we search, I will look here, it says top space. So I usually click it so I can see it better. So the fav button top, is equal to the tweet text label, which is this part, bottom. And right now it's like 37.5. That's a lot of space between them. Because remember, this is going to be the bottom. Like there's going to be whatever the tweet, how long it is, and then we're just going to get. So, oops, I just made a mistake. Let's undo. Thank God for undo. Okay, so we were going, let's get back to where we were setting. Okay. So here's my fav button, and basically it lost that. It's okay. These things do happen. So we're going to do it again. So vertical spacing. Now it shows up. So then we could do this. And fav button top equals to the tweet text label bottom. And I think about 10 points is good enough. So there's enough. Okay, so now we have the like button. Now we need also a button for retweet. We might as well just put that in there too. So let's look for another button and drag it here. Okay. So again, I like to give it a name. So I click on it and then I give it retweet button. Okay. And then if we go to what it should be set, so go back to custom, and then we're not going to have a label for it. And then we pick an image, which is going to be our retweet icon. So that's how it shows up. And we're going to have it have the same, so selecting it, we're going to have it have the same bottom space like the like button. And we're going to figure out what is the horizontal spacing between these two. So we're going to figure that next. So right now we just set the width and the height. We set the bottom. Let's see if this looks good. And it's complaining right now. It's saying that, let's see what's happening, that it needs to know where to put it. Right now it's kind of floating space in terms of the horizontal. Like it knows that there's a bottom, it knows that. So what we can do is we can select it and control drag to our fav button, and then we pick up horizontal spacing. So now if we go to the ruler, we'll see that there's and open it up. So we say, so fav button leading equals retweet button trailing. And right now it's 37. It's too wide apart. So again, I'll just pick 10. And now, so now it kind of looks good. So there's these. And then we have our tweet text. Okay. So let's first just see how this displays, in our home view controller. We haven't done anything else. We just added these buttons. We haven't hooked it up to the code, but let's just see how it looks. And interesting. Somehow the text is kind of not there anymore. We see these buttons, we don't see the text, so there's an issue. And here we see that there is some constraint issue here. And the reason for that is, and I have to tell you, trying to figure out layout constraint issues is always very tricky when you're doing these things. But one problem with this is that right now we had assumed in the code that this is like a fixed height for this view cell. So if you go into the home view controller, you notice that we have actually, where is it? there's a height. Will display, I think it's in the top part. Load, table number of rows, cell for row. And here we go, height for row. And we're kind of setting it to this 100. And there's just not enough to show the both the tweet and these buttons. So we want it to be dynamic. We want it to be that based on how much text we have, that the cell grows. So what we have to do is actually we're going to remove this. So we're not going to hard code it to this 100. So we want to somehow let iOS know that for this table view, we want the cell heights to be automatically calculated rather than this fixed 100. So take this, and there's a row height property for the table view, and if we actually set it to the automatic dimension, we're basically saying this row height is automatically calculated. And the other thing we want to do is give it a sort of an estimated height, so that at least it starts with a certain height. Remember, I had set it to 150 when I was figuring out all the constraints, so we can start with that. But if it's like it's going to be more or less, it will change it based on that. So let's see if that works. Keep our fingers crossed that that's all we need to display this. Yeah, and then now we see all the text, which is great. You know, so most of them are so short, but there is a few that, and then we see our buttons. But right now when we press on them, nothing happens. So now we're going to do the next part of basically associating some action with these things. So if you remember, we actually have, so let's go to the main storyboard. So when we're selecting our tweet cell, it's actually associated with this tweet cell table view cell. So when we actually use the associated, so we come here and we want to see the assistant editor, then there's two choices it kind of gives. Manual, it's just looking at the tweet view controller. But if we go automatic and pick, I have to basically, let's see, should pick it. So why is it? Okay, for some reason I had to put it right in the content view, but then we see this tweet cell table view cell. So we want the assistant editor to actually load that, because we're going to do the mapping. Right now we already have one for the tweet text label and image and time label, but we're going to also do outlets for these for the buttons. So let's give it that we do the retweet button and we control drag and create an outlet, and I'm going to call it retweet button so I know clearly what it is. And then there's the fab button. That's cool. And then we're also going to create actions for them, because people are going to be pressing on them, and so we want to know what's going on. So we go back to here and control drag. Then I'm going to do action favorite tweet. So here we go, that. And then we're going to do the same thing for retweets. So then we're going to do something when the user we'll just call it retweet. Okay, and then we basically, so now we have all this. Now we just have to hook it up. So let's do one at a time. So the first one is that we have a favorite button. Okay, so we want to figure out how we can toggle the favorite state of this button. What we're going to have is we're going to create a Boolean, sorry. So it's going to be favorited, and it's a Boolean, and initially it's a false. It's not. And then when we set set a cell to be favorited, so we're going to have a function set favorited, and then in here it's kind of like is favorited. It's a Boolean again. If so we're going to set favorited to match this as favorited, and then if it's favorited, then we want to set the image of this fav button. There's a call actually to set image, and you could create a UI image named, and in our case, we have that I think fav icon. Let's double check. It's favorite icon. Okay. Icon, and then red if it's and then usually when you set an image for a button, you have to specify for which state. We just do it for normal. We're not doing different images for different states right now. Okay, so it's favorited, sorry, we go this way. Else, if it's not favorited, we set it to gray. Okay. So far so good. So we just take this dash red out. So just the favorite icon, which by default is gray. So that's how we could, set the favorite. And then when we were first setting up, our home view controller, if you remember, cell for row, that's where we were kind of configuring our cells. So, so we basically need to figure out if the current tweet is already favorited or not. Now, this is the case where if we go to the Twitter API, there's this thing about tweet object. And, there's a bunch of attributes for it. I started looking for favorited to see if there is one or favorite. I don't see it. Sometimes you have to go to a specific tweet object, which is here. Favorite doesn't show up. Doesn't show up. Why not? Reference. Favorite. Okay. Let's look. That one is one, but I think on the Twitter object there should be one. Just 1 second. There's the Twitter object. There's the tweet object. Sorry, what I meant. In favorite, there's a favorite. Okay. There's a favorite count, and then if you look, it's actually, let's take the plural out. There's favorited. So there's an attribute in the dictionary that we get back. So if we go back to, we already were looking at this dictionary by looking at the tweet array, looking at particular tweet by indexing it by the index path dot row. And here, for instance, we looked at text, but we can also now pass favorited there, and then we will get a Boolean. So so we want to do set favorite, and as what we're passing it in, it would be this tweet array index path row. So that's the particular tweet data, but as part of it, we will be doing the favorited, and we want it to be treated as a Boolean. And usually, you know, we're now saying we're very sure that this is passed in and it's a Boolean, but for a lot of apps, you know, when it becomes more production apps, you want to really be careful and check and make sure, because sometimes the data you get back from the server is not always guaranteed to have all this stuff. But for right now, we'll just assume it is. So we set this favorite, and then if we look at our tweet cell, based on whether it's favorite or not, it will set the colors. And I have some tweets that are already liked, so let's see if this actually works. Yeah, so you see there's the red ones and the gray ones where they were not favorited by me. Okay, so this is all good. But what we need is we need to actually set either favorite or unfavorite a tweet. So we have to actually call an API. So if we go back to our wonderful Twitter API and search for, so there's this thing called favorites create, and favorites, there's also a favorites destroy. And for create, it's basically when you're creating a favorite. So this is the URL, which is we're most interested in. And what you have to pass in is the ID of a tweet. So whatever tweet it is that we select, we pass the ID in the parameters, and we use this URL, it will create. And if similarly, if we do destroy, it's like almost similar to the URL for create. And again, if we pass ID, it will unfavorite it. So let's do that. So we will take, first we'll do the create one. And then if we go to our Twitter API, so I'm gonna had done this, but so what I did is I created a method called favorite tweet, pass an integer for the tweet ID, same kind of scaping for success and failure for the closures. And then basically the URL that I just got from the Twitter API page is this. And I know I'm going to do a post because that's what it said. So I can just copy the code that I had, except now it's this URL, and the parameters are going to be different. So in this case, they said it's just going to be an ID, and I have to pass the ID. So this is for favorite tweet, and then we're almost doing the same thing for unfavorite. So let's just do it at the same time. So instead of favorite, we're going to call it unfavorite. And the only difference is that instead of this create JSON, it calls the destroy JSON. And similar thing. Okay, so we got the methods, but now, and we know that when we go to our tweet cell, we do have actions for favorite tweet and favorite tweet. But what we need to have first is this tweet ID, because if we don't have the tweet ID, we can't do it. So we have to somehow pass it to the cell. So if we go back here, let me just do it here. So let's create also a property or variable called tweet ID, which is going to be int, and initially it's going to be like a negative number, so we know it's not set. Okay, and then we go here and we set it here. So cell set tweet ID, and we know that if we take our tweet object or the dictionary, there is a key called ID. You can look it up in the Twitter. That actually is the ID of the tweet. And we need to let this know that it's an integer. And again, you know, when we're doing a production ad, we have to really, make sure, do double checking, because if it isn't an int or it doesn't exist, we need to error out. But for now, we assume Twitter is good. It's going to be passing us an ID and it will be an integer. Okay, so now we're going to do the action for when a user presses on that favorite button. So the way the favoriting works, that it toggles, that if something was already favorited, it'll be unfavorited. And if it was unfavorited, it would be favorited. So we're going to create a variable called to be favorited, which is opposite of the current state, whether it's favorited or not. And so we do the exclamation. Just to be favorited. Okay, so if is to be favorited, okay, then we're going to call our API, which is Twitter API caller, client, and favorite tweet. Yeah, let's kind of do that to make sure it's all there. Okay, code. The tweet ID is going to be the tweet ID that we've set with the cell. If it's successful, then we can actually change the colors of the button, because now we know it works. So we can do this set favorite, and it's going to be true, right? And then it's going to change the colors. Otherwise, we should show an alert. At least, we'll have, for now, favorite did not succeed. And then have that error thing here. Okay. If it's, what is it, set? Oh, and then we need to call self because we're in a closure. Else, if it's not to be favorited, then it's being unfavorited. So we do unfavorite. Oops, sorry. Let's move it. Unfavored. And again, we're going to pass the tweet ID and then the success and error. And for success, we also want to set favorite, but now it's false because it's no longer favorite. And then here the code is favorite, unfavored, and not succeed. And we can check there. And then here, local value before, what is that? Favorite before its declaration, but we had one. Oh, where's that? We just, and it could be let me just put it up here anyway, so that it's very clear that I'm setting these, and it could be that we're missing some two, so this is it. It needs one more to match this, otherwise it's kind of gets angry. And probably that other thing, but anyways, this will work. Okay, so let's just test it before we move on to retweet. So we have, I do this and I undo it. Let's do it again, and then I refresh and I notice that it still shows liked, and I didn't see any errors here. And then I can undo, like the second one I can do and then undo it. And then when I refresh, I still see it not favorited. So it's definitely getting this current state of the favorite for the tweet from the server and then setting the proper button here, and then we can interact with it. So it looks good. Okay, so our next last task would be for retweet. I'm going to do next. See you soon.